All right, welcome to the July 26th meeting of the Lifeboat Academy Finance and Legal Guild. And what I have, we'll start by going around and making sure that we have everything on the agenda that people need to talk about, want to talk about. And I will start off by saying, I think the main item that I have on my agenda is continuing the conversation that we had last time. We've simplified, we created a diagram of legal structure. We simplified that. We talked with the lawyers about it. Got some really, I think, encouraging and positive feedback. There's one layer of simplification, another layer of simplification that seems like it would be useful. And I tried to do some work on it, but I think I need feedback. So that's one of the things I'm hoping to talk through is what the more simplified diagram can look like, and then next steps. Because once we have the diagram, how are we going to use it? And in some context for that, in the other guilds, we have been developing our one of the things I love about sociocracy and the way that we've adopted it is we break into these seasonal plans, and usually without actually thinking about it, at the end of a season, there's a transition where we start wrapping up what we've been working on and we start thinking about the next season. And we are in that mode right now. So we've had, I think, really a lot of success in a couple of different areas. And now that with the 6 conversations and with the Connect the Dots Club development. And so that's another thing that I want to sort of talk about is the coordination around what we're doing and how that might fit with the fall plan. And I think we can just talk a little bit about what the touch points are for that. And then updates on just a few details on some developments on a couple different fronts. So that's what I have on the agenda, and we'll just go around. Is there anything that anyone wants to add? Heather, over to you.
Yeah, okay. So we have applied for a grant, Foodlands, that is federal government, and I can put the aim of it into our chat maybe.
Cool.
But I think that we're hoping anyway that it is relevant to a Lifeboat Academy.
Awesome.
It's basically, in response to food insecurity, equitable food, and it's a collaborative grant. And Michelle Satsumi, who's who we've contracted to do and who's steeped in sociocracy and is a really brilliant young woman, will be leading the grant if we have it. So we have mentioned Lifeboat Academy in it. It was something we put together very quickly, but I have some confidence might happen. And so let me just put the description in the chat, and then that's all I have to say about now. But
Cool.
yeah, I'll describe the project here. I'll put just the project here. And yeah, I think that's all that I need to say as far as we don't have to discuss it, but just almost like an announcement.
Awesome. Thanks. That sounds awesome. And just for the sake of clarity, we try to be as transparent as possible in these recordings and in these meetings. And to be transparent, I'm letting people know that there will be an in-camera part that is not going to be shared. So I'm being transparent about that part, which is not transparent, but it's for privacy and that kind of thing. So I don't have anything to add to the agenda apart from that. Over to Becca.
In camera meaning off camera meaning
Shh. Secrets.
secret. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I have a question about next steps that fits with Ben's agenda probably. And again, only have half an hour or so.
Well, so I guess the quick update I want to say about how the fall semester idea links to what we're talking about here is basically I'm sort of imagining parallel tracks where we have what will be a relatively big push. Geez, I'm trying to be concise, and that's making me be less concise. We had our 6 conversations. They went really, really well. There was a lot of enthusiasm to keep things moving. We've designed what we're calling the Connect the Dots Club, which is going to launch in September. The idea behind the Connect the Dots Club was it evolved from a book club where the goal was to give us all a space to talk about what our favorite resources are around resilience building, and to connect the dots in ultimately it morphed into what do lifeboat builders need to know. So if we are going to have a legitimate lifeboat academy, what's the curriculum? And so we have the Connect the Dots Club, which is a participatory collective sharing way of developing the curriculum for the Lifeboat Academy. So those conversations will be happening early in the fall. And the idea is that it sort of produces what would the first semester overview in lifeboat building course look like? You know, what would the 12 units be, and what are some of the items that we would cover? And so that's kind of the Lifeboat Academy track. And because of, putting together the diagram, one of the things that really came clear for me was this relationship between the Lifeboat Academy and the impact investors and the lifeboats themselves. And so I'm thinking that this fall is really about how do we pull together the lifeboat mentors. It's not necessarily focused on the undergrad. The language that we've been using is the Connect the Dots Club is an opportunity for lifeboat faculty and grad students to have a conversation about sort of big picture, how are these different topics connected, getting ready for inviting undergrads. And using that language, then the relationship between the impact investors and the Lifeboat Academy is the impact investors fund the projects and the Lifeboat Academy supports the projects to develop the local lifeboats. So that's the connection in my mind is this fall, if part 1 track is about developing the mentor relationships and what does mentoring look like, the other track is about bringing on the social impact investors. So with that in mind, I think I've also identified the key audiences, I think. Sorry that this print's really small here. And I just was, trying to put this together. So there's 2 parts. One is I am thinking about how do we have one diagram that allows mentors, impact investors, lifeboat builders, and the local community supporters to see where they fit, right? So it's sort of like one diagram where people can say, I'm in this bubble. And all of these guys here are the local lifeboat. So the lifeboat builders are equivalent to what we've been calling the farmer caretakers or the staff. I guess the other thing too is using some of the lingo from what we talked about above. So these are kind of the local lifeboat members, and they live under a multi-stakeholder co-op, right? So basically these are the stakeholder groups for the multi-stakeholder, what we've been calling the Stewardship Council.
Okay.
And they coordinate what happens on the land here in the local community. The social impact investors provide the resources for this all to come together. And it works, some language I've been trying out, it works like an endowment. It's like a rotating endowment. So impact investors are putting money into those investments with an expectation that they come out whole at the other side. but not that they're making money off of it. So it's about fueling innovation and impact. And then the lifeboat mentors are the ones that are kind of off to the side that have experience that are helping to provide the support structures necessary to keep the projects on moving forward. So there's the conceptual framework, and then there's the legal structures. And when the last time we talked about how there could be a couple different legal configurations for how that looks. You know, it could be one legal entity if the investors are willing to make a low interest loan, right? You know, those the options that we talked about. Or it could be that there are separate organizations. So I was trying to figure out, it seems like there should be one diagram that is just what roles do people play? And then another diagram that talks about maybe legal option 1 and legal option 2, you know, where we actually have like what the legal entities are. So that's how far I've gotten. Actually, no, that one other thing is then I think that we can create arguments for each of these groups. I think we have enough information now to say, who are they? What are their qualities? And why would they want to be involved? What are they looking to get out of it? For the social impact investors, for the insurance policy holders and a little bit the fair share sponsors, these are people that directly want to convert social or financial capital into connection. So converting privilege into connection. For the social impact investment, and this is actually relevant to the Joey conversation, these might be people who are less willing to give up privilege, but recognize that your financial privilege is dependent on social and natural resources to keep that financial capital viable. And so the people that I want to attract to the Social Impact Investors Fund are wanting to store their financial capital. They don't want to lose or convert financial capital, but they realize in terms of the triple bottom line that there's been too much emphasis on increasing financial capital, and that our social and natural capital are tanking. And so your financial capital is at risk if you're not willing to invest in the social and natural capital. So this is a way of investing your finances where you don't lose anything, you're not giving them away, but you're only maintaining the financial advantage in order to boost the social and the natural. So anyhow, that's the challenge that I'm having right now, is I'm trying to figure out how to piece it apart. What's enough that everyone can see where they are and not too much. So
I put a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to run off and watch the recording later if you send it.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck. So yeah, I guess with that, I'll just pass it over to Heather.
Yeah, okay. I like this diagram because it's simple. And I find that the complicated diagrams are more difficult to follow, and particularly if they get really small. And this is really, to me, this is really easy to understand, Ben, which is really great. And I have a couple of thoughts, is that I like the multi-stakeholder co-op for that direct functional kind of on the ground, example of a lifeboat. And I think the social impact investors, we might think about being a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
There's many examples of, like, what comes to mind, because I'm working with them more closely, is the National Farmers Union and the National Farmers Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's an example of the union. The union is even fairly political and outspoken, and whatever it is, the foundation is kind of there, to support the union. Another example of a relationship is the real estate foundation.
Mm,
The
mm,
real estate foundation is set up with the escrow from that can't be actually used, that the interest of that when everybody kind of, when a real estate agent puts the escrow into a bank account, the interest on that goes to the real estate foundation.
oh,
And real estate foundation is very progressive. They fund food lands, they fund all kinds of really great things. And so there's a kind of a dichotomy. They're getting their money from the fact that people are selling their property and selling it, of course, at an escalated price. So there's kind of a little bit of a discord there, but somehow they've kind of made it work.
mhm,
So I'm looking at the relationship between the, where we get our funding from and how we are able to kind of operate,
mhm,
you know?
mhm,
And then the mentors, it seems to me that that's um I think maybe the mentors could even be part of, if you have a stakeholder co-op, they could be part of the co-op, rather than another nonprofit society.
mhm.
I'd like to think that through. Anyway, that's my immediate thoughts for this diagram, which I find very useful. Over to Roland.
Yeah, I think this is a good distillation, and because one of the things that we've talked about before in trying to figure out how do you talk about this is trying to make the difference between what is what's the first step in what's going to be the simple message that's going to draw people in, where we can start to progressively give more and more information depending on where their interest is. And I think this is a great distillation. I want to sort of, I'm looking at Becca's questions, and one of them is, can people fit in more than one bubble? And the answer is absolutely, for sure, yes.
Mhm.
Because, this is, I'm at least, so I'm not talking as an authority, I'm talking as one of the guild members here. So for me, absolutely, this can fit in more than one bubble. One of the things that oh, that's neat. One of the
That is
things
good.
that I really hold to with this whole project is that this is not, we're not trying to create yet another rigid structure, but we want to, a little bit like with sociocracy, I suppose, sociocracy is, this is how we've seen how people work well together, and we've been able to create this model that explains how people worked well together, so you can adopt these ways of working to be able to work well together. And in the same way, the way what I'm want to encourage and to bring to this whole thing is that this is how people work together. This is how a community is together, and there's all sorts of different pieces and parts, and one person is never just one thing. I am not just Ben's partner. I'm also my mother's son, and I'm also Ali's friend, and I'm also Heather's colleague, all at the same time. And yet those people don't all connect. Anyway, so this is sort of a reflection of the interrelationship between things, and that we're just trying to pull it out in a way that it's easier to understand within the context of the kind of um, uh, project, community, grouping, collective that we're trying to um, to test, to put forward as a viable system. So over to Ben.
Yeah, that's all really good feedback, and interesting about the foundation part, because it also makes me think about foundations who already exist. Like you're talking, could could we go to the Real Estate Foundation and the Farmers Union and say, you know, we're seeing something similar. Do you want to get involved? The one thing that I think is missing from this model is the idea of multiple lifeboats. And that the social impact investors are, you know, basically it's startup funds. And that there should be this, you know, ongoing, like the endowment part, that it's paying back into the endowment, sort of like microloans, you know, but macro. I was actually thinking this is also like this is old-fashioned saving and loan stuff, right? Where the people are pooling their resources together and getting a little bit of interest, providing a mortgage to somebody else so that they can afford the big investment. And over time, they're paying the mortgage back into the savings and loan, and everyone comes out whole and, you know, a little bit ahead. So I'm just wondering if there's a way of fitting that on, or is that separate, you know, because yeah, and maybe that's too much detail. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. And I agree. And the other thing too, I like Becca's comment too about having the legal structure as kind of an overlay. If we can get this is how it actually works if we let all the labels go. Actually, the one other thing I wanted to say is I feel like the important part in here is, Roland, you were talking about how sociocracy is just about how people work well together. And I think pointing out strengths and weaknesses, like, you know, there are people in the world right now who have more financial resources available to them, and they are also limited because they don't have a direct understanding of what's really necessary to happen on the ground, because that's not where they're working. It's not where they're living. And so it isn't like they get to be, you know, to sit on their high perch, and, you know, that the lifeboat builders are showing up with equally necessary skills and capacities. They have the time and the passion to be able to really work on the ground. And the people with the financial means may not have that availability. So it's, you know, it's mutual benefit. It's not charity, it's not philanthropy. It is mutually beneficial. And so that, you know, we are all literally in this together. And some people have more money, and that's fine. And some people have more time, and that's fine. And we figure out a way of making that all, you know, sort of fit together. So anyhow, I'm totally in pitch mode. I'm trying to figure out I want to talk to people. One of the things I did this morning was I have a challenge question for potential impact investors. If your money no longer meant anything, you know, if the digits in your bank account, you know, there's hyperinflation or there's a complete crash of the financial market, would your social and natural capital keep you alive? And, you know, I think that I want to figure out how to kind of really put the challenge to people of, it's like you were talking about, Heather, you know, it's like there's just a lot of shit going down right now. And there are some people that are just waiting on the sidelines, hemming and hawing about whether or not they should invest. And, you know, how do we kind of nudge them? Anyhow, I'm rambling. Over to you, Heather.
Yeah, I'm thinking when you talk about the foundation, a good conversation would be have the foundation that's maybe closest to you in Pender, and that one possibility would be we would be a named fund. And a named fund is the foundation is able to give tax receipts and do all of that as foundations do. And the named fund has a purpose. And in the foundation, for example, the Van City Community Foundation has a named fund called Community Farms, which I helped to set up. And then we decided that the interest on that would go to Community Farms. And we can determine that. We also set up a council that was made up of, and rather than organizations, was made up of citizens. And that council made their decisions by consent, and also made their decisions if somebody from the council stepped down, as the remaining members of the council would decide by consent who else would be on the council, who they'd invite. And that
Mhm.
council would make decisions about how the funding is spent. So we've got that kind of as a lived sort of example with the Van City Community Foundation. But
Mhm.
it's like, I don't know whether we have to have our own foundation, which is another whole,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
thing, or, but it would be very, I think, helpful for us. I'm thinking in my mind, wow, Foodland should actually convene a dialogue between foundations,
Mhm.
and how, in terms of networking, how can we, like, should we set up a new foundation? What's involved in it? What are the, pros and cons? What would have to happen to do that? Is there a foundation that would easily, given if we're really clear about what we want to do and what kind of agency we want, and the sociocracy, the sociocratic structure we've set up, would that fit?
Mhm.
I'm really super keen on that.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, over to Roland.
Well, I've been thinking about the social impact investors and how to present that. And I think it is a little bit challenging if we want to do it in this particular diagram. I could see it as sort of like there's a presentation program that we used called Prezi, where you were able to click on a bubble and it would go a level deeper. So I
Mhm.
could see something like that. So on the
Mhm.
diagram, I don't know if there's a way of indicating that this in itself is part of a larger whole kind of thing,
Mhm. Mhm.
so that people know that, oh, there's more information about this, or that anyway. I'm not quite sure what that would look like. And I really like the idea of, Ben, you were addressing Becca's second question. I like the idea of figuring out how to do the overlay using. So I think that's really interesting. I can't see it in my head, but I think that would be an interesting way to go, and that would be sort of like the ones that, and I think that would be a really good example of, this is a good starting place. People get interested here and want more information, and then you can start talking in terms of overlay, because then that becomes more sort of specific to the type of interests that people have. So, and I'm really fascinated by this whole discussion around foundation and the stakeholder co-op and all of that. Um,
Mhm.
I think that there's some good stuff that's coming out. So over to Ben.
Yeah, well, and it makes me, one update I didn't include is we heard that there may be some interest from a local conservancy organization in this property. And so we are wondering about uh, again, it's just bringing in other stakeholders who could combine together. I think, as I was thinking through the potential legal structure, I kind of thought social impact, just to kind of put labels on things to oversimplify it. Social impact investors is a B Corp. It's a triple bottom line oriented corporation that is maximizing its return on investment, but with the social and natural investment being the emphasized bottom lines. So it's financial stewardship, maintaining the financial base, and triple bottom line B Corp kind of thinking. The Lifeboat Academy is pretty much a conventional educational nonprofit focused on a particular kind of education. And the local lifeboat is a social enterprise co-op, multi-stakeholder social enterprise co-op. And yeah, it's sort of like the actual configuration, the details around that seem. I've said this from the very beginning. I don't care. Whatever will get the job done, whatever will put it together. But I am really excited about the idea of the foundation or the fund, because that really is what it's a setup. It's an entrepreneurial fund, so yeah, using Prezi gives us the chance to break it into sort of one thing at a time, kind of link the diagrams together, but only be able to look at one at a time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think maybe I've got enough to go on, I think, until I actually try to do it. To, take this diagram. I'm going to start with this and then figure out what to kind of add to allow that overlay of sort of the legal structure, and maybe just, yeah, we'll go from there. Yeah, I feel like I'm moving into next steps. So I guess I'll send it once around for that. Over to you, Heather. And I need to step away for just a second, but I'll be right back.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's the work that Ben will do coming out of this. I'm thinking that at whatever given time, you would like me to either introduce you to people who are part of the different foundations that we have worked with, that I can do that. That I really do think that it would be good to convene some kind of a conversation between different foundations. And so, yeah. I guess the other thing too is that on Tuesday, I'm going up to Powell River. And Powell River, I'm going to be visiting the Blueberry Commons Cooperative, and who run based on sociocracy, and I'm pretty excited about checking in with them. And they're pretty comprehensive about what they're offering on their land. So a lot of it has to do with the kind of things we've been talking about with Lifeboat. And I'm meeting with Sarah Dent, who's with the Young Agrarians. And Sarah is under the, what do you call it? Oh, God, Heather. Like, they're under a charity, but they're the only project of the charity. So it's kind of like, it's the Agrarian Trust Foundation. I think they're a foundation. So I will check that out to see. Because, I mean, if you've got a foundation that is only attached to one particular society, or one has one project, that is maybe closer to what we're talking about, given it's not distracted by doing a lot of other things. Just saying, Ben, is I'm going up to visit Sarah Dent, and Young Agrarians, of course, is under the Agrarian Trust. And that relationship, they're the only project actually under that trust. So if we're talking about setting up something that we have only one project, and that's the Lifeboat Academy, then we don't have a lot of other distractions. Right? So I was just, just saying to Roland that I can take some action on introducing you to key people in foundations when you're ready for that and be part of the discussion. We can take a look at whether or not that's a good thing for us to set up as a webinar or a conversation to have amongst those foundations, that they could advise us on that. That might be an action that I could take. I will talk to Sarah about it for sure. I'll be meeting her Tuesday or Wednesday. And then over to Roland, I guess. Over to you. No, Roland.
Me.
Me,
Uh,
you. It's you and I've been discussing, so.
Yeah, that sounds all really good, Heather. And so it's bringing up questions for me about timeliness and preparation, and to whom would we want to speak to, feel like as soon as possible would be a good time, and to which organization would we want to have sort of the legal structure discussion settled before talking to, and is there a sort of mentioning, starting with a mention and then graduating to introduce into an introduction? So those are all those are questions that I have. I will pass over to Ben.
Mhm.
Yeah, it kind of feels like chicken and the egg, a
Yes.
little bit. What is a good enough? Well, yeah, let's use sociocratic principles. What's good enough for now, safe enough to try. I feel like I mean the thing that just keeps coming to mind is we're getting into pitch mode, and we need to figure out who we're pitching to and what we're pitching at this point. Like I don't think we need the legal structure. We need to break it back down. I think before we finalize any legal structure, we already talked about this. We wanted to talk to potential investors. Actually, I'm going to expand that and say we want to talk to potential stakeholders and see whether or not they're on board.
I'm in. Sorry.
And probably social impact investors are the first step, because like I think it's fair to say we can't really bring other lifeboat builders, timeshare croppers, etc. on board until there's some stability. So we need the social impact investors to provide the base for everything else to happen. And so I think then we need to be able to pitch them that investment is likely to yield fruit. And then, so they need to know why a lifeboat will be successful and what they'll get out of it, right?
Mm.
Or what do they need to know before? Because like we can't build the lifeboat until we have some sort of secure access to land. So all of the lifeboat building is dependent on having a solid base. So we need to be able to bring on board the people who can provide the solid base. Now that could be people like Steph and Bernie, and people who have property already. It could be bringing them on board and figuring out. Anyhow, I'm getting confused. I think it feels like a chicken and the egg kind of thing. So what's the bare minimum we need to move forward? Heather, over to
I
you.
have a suggestion, I think, is that I think we're ready to move forward on a co-op. I'm ready to move forward on a co-op. It's a functional co-op that's going to function on the land we already have, even though the land is not secure. And if we make this functional co-op and we don't get this land, like in the beginning, you said, well, we could go somewhere else. I think that the social investors need to know that there is a group of people that will make this happen. And if we can prove that we are a group of people, even if we can say we have decided that we're going to, we are in the process of creating a multi-stakeholder co-op to make this happen on the ground, And what we need is you to help us to secure the land. You know, otherwise we're going in, we're going.
Mhm.
And so I would be prepared to begin to do the co-op.
Mhm.
And I know that like it's getting close to when I have to leave and people are trying to get a hold of me. So
Yeah. All right. I think, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut the circle, but
no,
um,
there's just the three of us and I'm ignoring this phone call here.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
mute
good.
myself.
Let's just popcorn. So Ben, if you want to jump in and say something, you go right ahead.
well, I'm thinking about wrapping up really.
Yeah.
So that's, I think I was just thinking, what are the next steps technically? And what would the form of the co-op take? So we would need articles of incorporation for the co-op. And does that co-op need to, well, I guess once it's set up, then it can have a bank account.
Hmm.
I think so does the co-op need to, what we're saying is we can form a co-op that is not intended to be the ultimate landholder.
Right.
It is simply, it's a functional co-op
Yes.
and it would live under holdco, or at
Yes.
least right now we're setting it up so, and it could be at some point we change the articles so that it could take on ownership,
Yes.
but that would just be something that we would amend.
Yeah, well, we can set it up to say that we, you know, that one of our purposes would be to take on ownership or how, so that in our constitution, we are capable of doing that.
Okay.
We don't have to, but the intention is we would be able to. I
Are
know,
we still looking at then, so I guess where I still still have questions about, do we want, in many ways, this is kind of your original model, right? There's the landlord, the local co-op, and then the working co-op, the operational co-op. And we're talking now about, this would be kind of the local co-op. And there
yeah,
would,
you don't have to have two, you know, you have to have three functions, but you don't have to have three organizations.
right, right.
Right? You do need an organization that's going to hold the title of the land. And if that's held in a multi-stakeholder co-op, that can work. It's complicated though, but it can work. But we need money.
Mhm.
What we're looking at is, and this group that I'm looking at has some money and can have some money to operate and can have a business plan. It's a entrepreneurial kind of more model that can operate on the land, but it can't own the land. It can't raise the kind of money that you need to own the land.
Right.
So we need to go under a foundation or create our own foundation or whatever, I think, in order to be able to own the land, like at this point.
So you're saying then, like, the foundation, the social impact investors could actually be the holdco as well.
Yes.
Cool. Huh.
I don't know what the next step is to explore that, but just to look at other people maybe who have done that or considered that.
Well, that sounds like it's kind of modeled after the Terre de Liens, because they are the landlords. Well,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
they are the organization that are sort of managing these 2 to 3 farms, but each farm is actually functioning independently and is part of this umbrella.
I
Huh.
mean, that is what
Yeah.
this model globally, for sure.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, cool. I think I've got stuff to work on.
Good.
So, yeah, I'm feeling, at least at the moment, until I actually try to take whatever we've talked about and put it into something else, like a presentation. Anyhow, I'm feeling good. How are other people feeling? Are we ready to wrap up? Anything left to talk about?
Lots, but not today.
Okay,
I think
fair
I
enough.
just want to tease out, that this is all about relationship and relationality. So whoever we can, Heather, if you're talking to people, at least start mentioning it and have that sort of eventually build up to something else.
For sure, I will.
Yeah. So a
I'm
foundation could own, part of the fund could be owning real estate.
Yeah, or yeah, securing land for food security, whatever it is, that
Uh-huh.
it's more charitable, like you don't, yeah. Oh, it's ownership, but it's ownership for a social purpose.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And the cooperative is I think that we're in a better place with this particular project than we are with many of the projects that we have, because right off the get-go, the earning the money, or the, is less important in terms of the farming and enterprise. So this is more like an educational enterprise. It's kind of like if we had a multi-stakeholder co-op, and then we could probably apply directly for charity ourselves, as an educational institute,
Mm-hmm.
with the
Mm-hmm.
farming end of it just being the functional end of it. It's the
Yeah.
program end of it that we need in order for us to do the educational programming.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
another way to
And
do
even
it.
the farming, I entered into it thinking regenerative farming was a good material example of the kind of cooperation I was trying to get in an organization. So it's almost like growing the food is just an example
Yeah,
for
no,
the
I know that.
education. Yeah.
And
So
that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's why you're in a, like I shouldn't say you, um, that's why we are in a stronger position than
Mhm.
what Foodland started off with,
Mm.
which we started off with a very strong community, food security lens,
Mm-hmm.
where the growing and the foraging was the primary purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Hannah Whitman, who was working with me, was really keen to do that, because we were, and I've said this many times, is that the push was to just create these eco villages, which were kind of really self-serving,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and like people who had privilege, they were converting their privilege into collective kind of uh, home for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't have the greater purpose. But I think we're now moving towards a place where we could become charitable.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing might be to just to talk to some charity lawyers about, okay, how would we get charity as a multi-stakeholder co-op if we could get charitable status, but
Mm-hmm.
we're really limited. But I think that we are unlimiting ourselves by having more of an education focus,
Mm-hmm.
because what I know CRA requires is to have a curriculum and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we in Foodlands couldn't put out a curriculum. I spun out this fanciful thing about experiential learning and blah, 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 but I didn't have the language that they require for a curriculum, and people who are qualified to teach the curriculum and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the conventional way that they want things worded.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want us to go down another rabbit hole, but I do think that there is, like, let's design it the way we want it, like you were saying, Roland. Let's do that first and say, okay, do we go with a foundation? Do we create a foundation? Do we go with an existing foundation? Or do we form a cooperative that can be charitable? If we can limit it to those three options, then maybe at least we won't get too distracted with all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah, 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 yep. Can you give me the three options? So it's
We go with an existing foundation
mhm.
who would take us on as a project, and the project would be the Lifeboat Academy. We might become a named fund, as they call it. and it would be called the Lifeboat Academy.
Mhm.
So then we'd have to find the foundations that are close to you that might do that.
Mhm.
Second one is that we form our own foundation. I guess it's not even secondary, because I think the secondary is that we form a community service cooperative that could be charitable.
Mhm.
Oh, and then the third might be that we form our own foundation, and that the community service cooperative is the project of our own foundation. So really the first decision is, to me, is do we go with existing or do we form our own?
Mhm.
And if we form our own, do we form two entities or do we pull it together into one entity?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and even that, the talking to the existing foundations, if we do form one, it might be a collaboration, right? So it could actually be, and then there are going to be other foundations involved in, shaping what the right structure is.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
We've got allies in other foundations that we can look to.
yeah, this is very cool. I'm feeling mildly optimistic about all this.
Well, I think that what happens is that, you are such both a broad thinker and a deep thinker. And every time we think broadly, it gets bigger, and time we think deeply, it goes deeper. And and those two processes are stimulating intellectually,
Yeah,
but somehow it needs to come down to, okay, what are we going to do?
yeah. Well, that's one of my favorite quotes is Winston Churchill. He said, if you want me to speak for 10 minutes, it'll take me some time to prepare. If you want me to speak for an hour, I can do it tomorrow. And I think that's, we've just been trying to like contain.
Yeah.
And I think we're there. So yeah, I think next steps then are, I'm going to try to put together something is like a relatively simple pitch that we could use with existing foundations or other funders.
Okay.
With this idea of kind of an educationally focused lifeboat project.
Yeah. And it's focused on community food security, really.
Well, and I think resilience still is
Or
because
resilience.
okay,
Okay, it's not
food
just
security comes under,
it's not
but
just food, okay, but
Yeah.
it's focused on resilience
community resilience.
with a
Yeah.
focus or an emphasis on food. I think if it's too broad,
Mhm.
you lose the food.
Mm.
Please let's not lose.
Yeah. Well, no, I think we're good there, because then baked into the very core of this is how many calories because we're setting it up as an empirical experiment. One of the key things is how many calories of food can we produce, and how many people can we support off of this much land in a food, water, shelter, energy.
That's great. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of baked into it as its educational purpose. And yeah, cool. All right. I think we're
Okay,
at time.
we're good to go.
Yeah, I think we're good to
Okay.
go.
I have to go and pick my sister up right now and bring her here, and we'll get into the drama of all of that as well today.
Deep breath.
Okay, thank you, and love to be with you. Bye.
Yeah.
Ditto.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Bye.